In the east of India lies a country that was formerly called Burma, but is now known as Myanmar. The earliest civilizations in this region date back more than 10,000 years, though they can hardly be described as civilized in the modern sense. They were primarily communities of rice farmers who lived off the land. Experts suggest that the inhabitants of Myanmar are descendants of Tibetan peoples who migrated southward in search of better living conditions and fertile land for agriculture. This migration explains why the Burmese language shares a close affinity with Tibetan. For thousands of years, these early settlers lived in the area without constructing major cities or leaving behind significant historical artifacts. The arrival of Buddhism. Around 2,000 years ago, Buddhism made its way into Myanmar from India. Before this, the people of Burma practiced no organized religion. The spread of Buddhism marked a turning point in the region's history, profoundly shaping its culture and beliefs. The Nanzhao dynasty's influence. By the 8th century, the Nanzhao dynasty of China sought to expand its empire into Myanmar. They invaded the region, and this marked the beginning of the first true civilization in Myanmar. It was the Nanzhao dynasty that later formed the pagan empire in Burma. This dynasty was Buddhist and fundamentally changed the shape of Burma. They built many Buddhist temples there, some of which still exist today and are somewhat of a symbol of Myanmar. Many tourists visit Myanmar to see these temples because the beautiful buildings are constructed in lush green lands, and such a sight cannot be found anywhere else. The pagan empire developed Burma for 2 centuries, but like all empires, it eventually came to an end. Usually, these empires reach their end when the people are dissatisfied and actually wish for the empire to fall. In the pagan empire, this situation continued until the Mongols came, putting an end to everything and taking over all of Burma. After a while, the Mongols lost their power, and in Burma, everyone who rose up took a piece for themselves. This chaos and tribal conflict continued until 1530. The year a Burmese man named Tabin Shweti reunites Burma and becomes the king of all of Burma. He spends 20 years trying and manages to bring Burma into a certain state of stability. However, he is assassinated in a conspiracy, but he had a competent successor, a man named Binna. Binna brings Myanmar to its peak and even adds Thailand to his empire. But eventually, every person has a limited lifespan, and Binna's life also comes to an end. With Binna's death, Burma again falls into turmoil, and once again, feudal lords and tribes rise, each claiming a piece and declaring themselves kings. For 152 years, the country remains unstable until we reach the year 1752. Another dynasty, known as Konbaung, takes control of Burma and forms a unified empire once again. This dynasty was very expansionist and aimed to add more territory to Burma. They constantly attacked China and India, annexing lands into their empire. The Indians and Chinese repeatedly launched military campaigns and recaptured the lands until we reached the 19th century, when the British took control of India. The Konbaung dynasty never considered that this was no longer ancient India, and they couldn't just enter its territories so easily. They attacked India and annexed some areas of eastern India into their empire. The British suddenly realized and decided to teach them a lesson so they wouldn't do such things again. The British launched a military campaign and invaded Burma, completely erasing the Konbaung Empire from the map, making all of Burma one of Britain's colonies. The Indians could coexist with the British and more or less accepted colonization, but the Burmese absolutely rejected it and started guerrilla warfare. Because of this, the British became angry and imposed a famine on Burma, one that killed half of Burma's population due to starvation. When Burma was subdued in this way, the British realized it had great soil for rice farming, so agriculture flourished there. They also brought in a large number of Indians as slaves to work in the rice fields day and night. This story continues for nearly 50 years, meaning that Indian slaves, generation after generation, are working in the rice fields in Burma, and the British are reaping the profits. Then we reach the year 1941, a time when World War II is at its peak. The Japanese Empire, which has become very powerful, has taken over East China and is moving south. The Japanese army easily defeats the British in Burma and brings it into the Japanese Empire. However, this occupation is short-lived, lasting only 4 years, as Japan is defeated and the region is returned to British control. In 1947, India gains independence, but with a major wound, the separation of Pakistan. After that, in 1948, the British grant Burma its independence, but they leave behind a corrupt government. The government is completely corrupt, to the point where people can't even walk easily in the streets. There is street violence, the economy is severely damaged, there is a shortage of food and hunger, and many other problems. The independent Burma has become a miserable country. Then, 14 years later, in 1962, a military coup occurs in the country. This coup worsened the situation of the country. Poverty, misery, and insecurity increased, and hunger spread everywhere. People began to protest until we reached 1988, when another military coup took place, and a new group of military leaders came into power. When this new government took office, they completely changed the name of Burma to Myanmar, saying, "It's mine, I can call it whatever I want." By 1990, this military government tried to make a show of democracy. They held an election, and one of the candidates, a woman named Aung San Suu Kyi, received the majority of the votes. The military dictatorship didn't like the idea of her taking power, so they declared the election invalid and placed Aung San Suu Kyi under house arrest. My country was unstable and in a bad state, with no progress, and everything was heading downhill towards collapse. Then we reached the year 2008, the year of Cyclone Nargis, the deadliest cyclone ever recorded in the Indian Ocean. The cyclone killed 138,000 people, most of whom were from Myanmar. For an entire month, winds were blowing at 215 kilometers per hour, destroying everything in its path. Myanmar, poor and financially struggling, suffered damages amounting to $13 billion. This cyclone caused the military government of Myanmar to become somewhat unstable. The people, who were all supportive of Aung San Suu Kyi, who was under house arrest, started protesting, demanding that she be made the head of government. Because of these tensions, Myanmar came back into the news, but for reasons that were not at all favorable for the country. Eventually, the military government had to retreat, and Aung San Suu Kyi was released from house arrest and became the leader of Myanmar. After the Indians entered Burma, a large number of Indian Muslims also arrived. Because of this, Myanmar at that time became a country formed by two main religions: one, the Muslims, who are in the minority, and the other, the Buddhists, who are in the majority. When Aung San Suu Kyi took power, tensions between the Muslims and Buddhists intensified. The Muslims in Myanmar are referred to as the Rohingya. Since the Muslims arrived here, they have always been in conflict with the Buddhists, and because their population was smaller, they were massacred by the Buddhists. However, during Aung San Suu Kyi's time, the situation completely changed. Facebook took over the entire country, and the Buddhists used it to spread hatred. They made it so that all Buddhists in Myanmar wanted to destroy the Rohingya. The genocide began, and every day the Buddhists would storm the villages where the Rohingya were living, massacring them. The Rohingya couldn't defend themselves against the Buddhists, so most of them fled to Bangladesh. Over 700,000 people sought refuge in Bangladesh, and around 20,000 to 30,000 others were caught by the Buddhists and killed. Aung San Suu Kyi did nothing at all. It was as if the hatred engineered on Facebook was coming from the government of this lady herself. Then we arrive at 2021, when the military in Myanmar sees what this lady is doing to the country, completely dismantling it. They stage another military coup and arrest Aung San Suu Kyi. After 10 years of her rule, power has once again fallen into the hands of the military. The country is worse than ever, and there is no plan to improve it. After this coup succeeds, Myanmar gains a global position, taking the first place in opium production from Afghanistan, and becomes the largest producer of heroin in the world. You should be familiar with the Golden Triangle, also known as the Opium or Heroin Triangle, where the majority of activity in this area is related to Myanmar. Countries that become hubs for drugs never see good days. Powerful mafias and cartels around the world keep these countries unstable to carry out their operations. The people of these countries suffer terribly. These countries are not just one or two, Mexico, Colombia, Bolivia, Laos, the Philippines, the Dominican Republic, countries that are at the mercy of drug cartels and never experience peace. Even now, it is unclear how Miss Suu Kyi came to power, and the most significant thing she did during her tenure was displacing and killing 700,000 to 800,000 Rohingya. After this, once her work was done, another coup took place. Please support us with subscribe, like, and comments, and thanks for your watching.